I got a request to do a video explaining what I believe to be the fundamentals of effective essay writing and responsible poetry task. It's a very, very complicated question, and I'm not going to spend a long time on this now because I know you tend to switch off if these videos are any longer than 6, 7, 8 minutes. So I've done a mind map, and if you're in my classes, the mind map will be on your Moodle. If you are not in my classes and you want these mind maps, you can purchase them. Just email me at pmcbrunner@icloud.com. But I want to go through this because I've been asked, and I know a lot of you have mocks coming up soon. So writing a poetry essay, I like that quote. I won't go into now why, but I do. So study poetry is on paper 2. It's section 3 of paper 2. It's worth 50 marks or 12.5% overall. You've got an hour to answer the question. By the way, I was also asked to comment on time management, and I think I can do that in 20 seconds. Paper 1, you've got 170 minutes. Give over 70 minutes to your composition because it's worth 25%. It needs to be done in a very slow, methodical way. Give over between 60 and 70 minutes to your question A, because in that time you're going to look through your paper and decide what A's and what B's you're going to do. And then give 30 to 40 minutes to your question B. And I would always make sure I don't finish or have my third answer as composition, because that's the one area you cannot afford to run out of time on. Paper 2, again, you've got a specific amount of time, 3 hours and 20 minutes or 200 minutes. I would give over 60 minutes each to my main essays. So that's to my Macbeth essay, single text if you're not doing Macbeth, studied poetry and comparative essay. Then 20 minutes at the end for my unseen poetry. Leave the unseen poetry till the end, because again, if time management is an issue and you run out of time anywhere, that's okay to run out of time there because it's only worth 5%. It's not okay, but it's the least worst. So we know 8 poets are prescribed for study. There will be 5 questions on your paper. You have to answer 1. We know the minimum requirement is you should prepare 4 poems by 4 poets. That will give you the material to answer at least 1 question. But the best practice is to prepare 5 poets and 5 poems per poet. If you do more than 5, great, but you don't need to. The reason that that's best practice is because that will give you a choice of questions on the paper. Your completed essay has to be substantial, and it has to come in at around 1,000 words. Nobody's counting the words, but we're talking about in terms of enough depth and exploration and detail. That's generally in around 1,000 words. And some of you are still obsessing about how many pages, which is a nonsense. But if you want to know how many pages average sized handwriting in the answer booklet, that's anywhere between 4 and 5 pages of the answer booklet. Excuse me. It's very important to remember that every poetry question will have a language element, and that you will be required to comment on the writer's use of language. There are things that you need to be aware of in your poems: the writer's ability to create imagery and the techniques he uses or she uses, the writer's ability to create rhythm and the techniques they employ to achieve that goal, and then other techniques that they use to deliver their thoughts in an impactful way. And there they are there. Again, I'm not going through those because I'm conscious of time. Be aware of the type of words and wording that is used in poetry questions. Look at the type of language that's used when they're assessing the style part of the poet's work. So if you were asked, does your poet's work have an engaging style, or is your poet's work vivid and energetic, or does your poet's work contain provocative imagery? These are the types of words or phrases that have featured in past examinations. If you want to do a bit of practice and you think that you could benefit from doing a bit of practice, I suppose the best thing I could say to you is take a poem, take a wording and ask yourself, okay, is there any provocative imagery in that? Is there a diverse range of imagery in this poet's work? Do I think their work is engaging? And then ask yourself, why is that the case and what can I point at? Maybe it's their use of sibilants. Maybe it's the simile in the second stanza that you found provocative, or maybe it's the biblical allusions or literary allusions that they use. So you have to think about that. When you're answering on that part, on the language part, your work must be thoughtful and evidence-based. The first big mistake people make is they say, oh yeah, here's a quote, and this is an example of his masterful use of aesthetically pleasing language, but they never explain why it's aesthetically pleasing, or indeed what that means, or what's masterful about it. Or they say, yeah, he uses effective use of, this is an effective use of poetic narrative scenes. And you're asking yourself, well, what's effective about it? You're saying it's effective, why is it effective? So a big mistake people make is they use, they pay lip service to the question, they say things and then they don't explain them. Second mistake, they try to cheat the system by rote learning essays. I cannot emphasize enough. I know a lot of people will say, No, Paul, you're wrong on that. I don't care. Do not rote learn essays. Be prepared. Read sample answers if you're in my classes. I've given you loads of sample answers. Read them for ideas. But you have to be able to answer the specifics of the question that comes up on the day. And rote learning will restrict your ability to do that rather than enhance. I think it's very important to practice writing paragraphs. All an essay is a collection of paragraphs. Taking a poet's work, taking a key moment from a poem or a key image, and see if you can mould it to the wording of a past question. For example, if you're looking at me and you see, you know that in a past exam it asked, does she have an appealing descriptive style? Well, I can take a poem like Hearth Lesson or Cora Anti or Death of a Field and ask myself, okay, where's the description in that, and how would it be appealing? What could I say about it being appealing? That, in other words, you're having to think. Every question will also have a thematic element. You have to think about why the poem was written. Is there a message being delivered? Is the poet, philosophizing and coming up with like insights into, life and life experience? Does the poem have a purpose? Is there an obvious reason for this poet to have decided to write this poem? You have to get a handle on that for every poem you're studying. What's the purpose? What's the message? What are the philosophical insights that the poet draws or that you can draw from reading the poem? I think it's very useful if you prepare motifs. Motifs are applicable in both language and theme, but I think in thematically it's a great idea to think about what links the poems I've studied together. Are there any similar concerns that I can use to connect together my analysis of the poems that I'm going to discuss? So there's some examples of Kavanagh's Search for Contentment, Meehan's exploration of social issues, Dickinson's intense appreciation of the wonder of the natural world, Rich's exploration of the challenges facing women in her society. When you look at those poets, those things connect some of the poems together. So when you're planning out your answer, if you're going to go poem by poem, then that would mean that you logically would move from one to the other by using those motifs as links. It's a clever little thing to do. Lots of the best students do that. We know that we look at the past questions, look for keywords in the past questions, and then ask yourself, okay, how would I answer on Mahan or Meehan or Yeats or Rich or Kavanagh if I was asked whether his work or her work is profoundly insightful? What does that mean? What would I say if I was asked whether or not John Donne's poetry is intellectually stimulating? What did they mean when they asked last year about a poet's work illustrating the triumphs, trials and limitations of the human condition, or indeed whether or not the poet's themes are relevant to a 21st century audience? So these are all really, really good study tips. Have your poem, have your past questions, look at the keywords in the questions, and then just ask yourself, okay, if I was to write about, the wild swans are cool, or if I was to write about At the Round Earth's Imagined Corners, or any of those poems, how would I be able to say, what is it about it that's profound? What's the insights I got? What were the lessons I learned? What made me, what was intellectually stimulating? Why was that work analytical? In other words, detailed and thought-provoking. So anyway, I know you're probably not even watching at this stage. By the way, if you do like these videos, will you do that, please? And, pass the word around. I want as many people as possible to get the benefit if these videos are of any use. Look, when you're writing a poetry essay, structure is very important. Any essay. So very, very quickly, make sure your opening sentence, OS, is really short, direct, in other words, uses the keywords in the question or synonyms of them, and is confident. Creates a sense in the mind of the examiner that this student, has picked this poet because they know this poet really well. Not a bad idea, by the way, to start open with a quote and then use that to segue into your essay. I like that, but not everybody does it. Your opening paragraph must contain a clear thesis. So what is your response to the question? So for example, if the question asks about Yeats, and the question says that Yeats' poetry contains vivid imagery, which he uses to explore themes relevant to contemporary Ireland, well then you've got to say that in your opening paragraph. Yeah, Yeats' poetry is vivid, contains powerful images, and there is no doubt that Yeats addresses themes which were, relevant 100 years ago when the poems were written, but which remain powerfully meaningful in the modern world. And then I know, okay, that's the label. I can see that's the thesis. So the thesis is your argument. What are you arguing? What's your point, your argument in your essay? Your opening paragraph needs to have little links to what you're going to say later on. Don't say, in this essay, I will discuss the following poems. Or don't say, in this essay, I will discuss the following elements. Don't say, I will do. Just do it. So give me a few ideas. So if you're going to say, talk about Derek Mahan's poetry, you're going to talk about a question about how he explores structures and values in society in a style which is vivid and energetic, well, then you've got to be able to point at, his use of characterization, which brings these characters to life, and setting description, and historical scenarios, which he uses to explore themes which are relevant to the structures of the society he inhabits. So, you have to give some sense of what's coming later on in your essay. Sorry, I've already talked about that. Yeah, continuity links, I've been asked to comment on them. I'll do a separate, very short video. But when you're moving from the end of one discussion, one paragraph, to the next one, there should be a link through a word, a phrase, an idea, something which connects the end of one paragraph into the next one. Coherence of delivery is all about sequencing of ideas. So it can't feel random, it can't feel scattergun. There must be a sense of planning and ease of movement from one topic or poem to the next, and that's called continuity. When you're writing your development paragraphs, follow the RIC rules. And if you don't know what they are, there's a video on this YouTube channel that explains them. But essentially, make sure everything you're saying is relevant, informed, clear, and that you contextualize. Every paragraph needs to have a purpose that's clearly relevant to the question. The paragraphs should make points which are separate but connected, so separate from each other, but connected to the overall point of the question. You need to use quotation, but not overuse it, not lash loads of quotation down without stopping to analyze it. And the most important thing is that there's a mixture in your paragraphs or in your analysis, because you can do A-B structure, of course, between summarizing, in other words, showing me the knowledge, and then commenting or explaining why what you're saying is relevant to the question under discussion. And finally, don't overthink your CP, but write one. Make sure you write a brief CP, which goes back to the question and also to whatever you said in your opening paragraph. And I like the idea of a CP which mirrors the opening paragraph, not mindlessly repeats it, but which has some of the ideas that were in the opening paragraph repeated. So that gives you a lovely circular structure to your essay. For me, it's important to remember before you start studying what you're being examined on, your ability to accumulate knowledge or learn, so that's the knowledge of the poet's work and the meaning of the poems and the use of various different techniques. You're being examined on your ability to express yourself in an articulate manner, okay? And you're being examined on your ability to analyze the evidence that you have gathered, the knowledge that you have accumulated in the light of a particular statement. Now, most students will only focus on number one. They think once they've studied their 4 poems and the poet's name comes up, they're done. They're not, and that's why most people score badly here. If you want to score well, take a measured, balanced approach and demonstrate your knowledge, but always remember that the knowledge you're providing, the information you're providing, is only evidence you are using to support your point of view. And if you leave out that vital explanation, if you leave out that vital personal engagement with the question, thinking and in a thoughtful way, explaining why your evidence and point is relevant, you ain't going to score well. There you go. I hope that made some sense. Again, if you want the mind maps, if you have, I'll pop that up on Moodle for everybody who's in my class. And if you're not on, if you're not in one of my classes, then you want to get copies of the mind maps, I think that's number 28 or 29 now. You can email me. Thanks very much, folks. Have a lovely day.